Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's November 8th, 2021, and the time is 7:01 p.m. I'm going to spend just a moment explaining our procedure tonight so we'll all understand what items we're moving from. Our first section of the meeting tonight is called a special session. And what we will be doing is having a reading of the ordinances for third, second, and second reading. And after that, immediately, we will take a motion to move into executive session. And that takes a roll call vote. And that is a private session that will include the elected officials here, some of the staff, and the city council members. At that time, once we move into that vote to go into executive session, everyone will be asked to leave the room. And as soon as we're finished with that, we'll welcome you back into the room. We will then convene our committees that are meeting tonight. We have all 5 committees meeting, along with a special presentation from the Economic Development Council. So it's a very full schedule, and we appreciate your patience with it. And hopefully I'll do a good job of explaining as we move from section to section of the meeting tonight. Our first item of business is establishing a quorum, and all members of council are present. We'll now move into ordinances for third reading. 10321 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 10321, authorizing the 2021 Street Paving and Repairs Project number 337, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 103-21.
Second.
The ordinances, as you just read in the title, it mainly has to do with moving funds around and increasing the amounts so that the improvement project can go forward. Also, it puts $283,000 to APR Income Tax Fund 273, Transaction Code 500, for paving/parking lot construction as part of the West State Park Improvement Project number 341. And then the next sections indicate where the funds will be appropriated to.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10321. Are there any questions or comments from council members, elected officials, administration, or the audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 11421 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 11, Business Regulations, Chapter 11.04, Vending, Peddling, and Soliciting, Section 11.04.03, Regulation of Vendors, Peddlers, and Solicitors, Penalties. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 114-21.
Second.
And it is, as you read in the title, we are amending our ordinance, considering what the penalties are. We have copies of the changes on all the drives. I think everyone has seen them. We've discussed them in committee. And I move that we pass it.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 11421. Are there any comments or questions from council members? Yes, Councilmember Smedley.
Thank you, President Nisley. While I support this particular ordinance, I would welcome any reevaluation of the current status of our vending situation, given some of the comments that we received at last week's session. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions from council members? From elected officials or administration? And I believe we do have a member of the audience who would like to speak. You'll need to give your name and address, and if you represent any particular group, and you'll have 3 minutes, and the lights will appear on the podium to indicate when the time is up.
Okay, thank you. My name is Alex Schwartz. I live at 36 Central. I'm here representing myself, and I guess I don't know probably as much as everyone else about it, but I would like to second the thought of like we should look at these vending rules. I'd ask that you don't push it through, as immediately it would be a negative effect towards me and my friends and my coworkers. But if it has to go through, I mean, I hope that it goes through in the spirit of let's take a look at this and see what we can continue to make better and more equitable for people, and just try and make Athens more fertile ground for local businesses. And I don't really have much more to say than that. I feel a little frustrated and a little worn down, but beyond that, I'm still hopeful. I think everyone here is mostly coming at it from perspective of trying to do what they think is best, So I think there's good faith there, but I'd ask just to take special considerations to it, and if you could, put it off and spend some time thinking or talking about what we can do instead of just increasing the fines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. And yes, if you'd like to speak, same name and address, and if you represent a group, and you'll have 3 minutes.
So I'm James Wonky, 55 North Court, Hot Shots Food Truck. I have a prepared statement. So after last week, I've had some time to reflect on how I want to be perceived, and I really just want you to understand my motivations and what we've been going through as a new business during COVID, and to hopefully restart the conversation on vending. Honestly, 3 minutes isn't enough to fully inform you on the issue, and so if you have any questions at the end of my statement, please feel free to ask. I would be happy to answer. Peddling and vending in general are an entry-level point for many small business entrepreneurs, and I would dare say it's hypocritical of anyone who has taken up the banner of affordable housing or representing disenfranchised people to do anything which would make it harder for working-class people to stay employed or start a local business. And that's exactly what the current and proposed rules do. How else are they supposed to even afford a house? Not everyone can buy $1 million building or is willing to lease a property for thousands of dollars from a landlord who might attempt to seize their assets if they fall behind. This isn't fantasy, and has happened to multiple local business owners on Court Street who I know. Frankly, corporations rule the world now, it seems like, and companies like Starbucks and Chipotle make it impossible for people like me to do business near the college. So when faced with the slow yet inevitable closure of my business, my decision was to not go silently into the night like all the other vendors who have already recently perished in our town. Not because of a lack of business, but because of a lack of access and the inhospitable policies which make mobile vending all but impossible to viably maintain in Athens, which should rightfully be seen as a stain on Athens' reputation as a city that supports local business. The attempt to change the rules means I've at least demonstrated that, I feel. Unfortunately, the way in which we've responded here feels jumping the gun, and was clearly made without consideration of the facts that have led us up to this point, and the lack of conversation about it as well. I highlight this by again asking who even benefits from this rule change. Where are the people I harmed? By setting up outside my family business with my neighbors and landlord's permission. The only thing I've done is attempt to save my employees' jobs, and the only complaint I got was from another vendor who didn't understand the circumstances. Something I can't be mad about, because like me, he's probably on the verge of financial ruin as a result of these ridiculous rules. Finally, where are the people who support this change? I haven't seen anybody speak in favor, and I kind of think they're nowhere to be found. I'm not asking for the world from you, I'm just identifying a problem. I'm open to conversation and working hard to find fair solutions where other vendors can potentially set up at night outside of our business on Court Street. And I would like to formally request a sponsorship from one of you to help me make this change happen, positive change. Finally, I want to let you know I have not avoided accountability for my actions, because I've been going to court every week with Judge Grace, where I'm attempting to prove legally that at least some of these rules are over-restrictive and unconstitutional. And if I lose, frankly, I don't know what difference it makes to lock me up or increase fines. So please support local business and vote no to this change.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Member McCary.
Thank you. I was thinking it might be helpful for all interested persons to understand where council makes decisions regarding the kind of overall analysis of food truck sort of vending sort of pieces. Is that typically, if we were to take the suggestion to have a larger conversation about food truck vending in Athens, can we clarify where that happens?
Before, there was conversation between the administration and several council members who led that, and I believe Councilmember McGee began some of the conversations, and then it was completed, the last set was completed by Councilmember Crowell. And so I would say that once again, that you know, I would think I would open the discussion or the possibility for discussion in the same way. And that did involve vendors. Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you. So what happened, Member McCary, is that we did have some issues and we wanted to hear from the vendors, and so we convened an ad hoc vending committee, which included all vendors who wanted to participate. There were only 2 that actively participated. And it also included a bricks and mortar restaurant owner to have that perspective. We met monthly for about 4 or 5 months, and talked about some of the changes that might help vendors in the city of Athens. It was, I believe, a constructive committee, but for numerous reasons, including the sort of diversity of voices that were not there, it didn't lead to a lot of changes. And there was a sticking point with what the city recommended was the best sort of situation for the city, and what comparable communities throughout Southeast Ohio offer to vendors, and with what the groups that the two gentlemen who did come to some of the meetings, what they would really wanted. And so we couldn't sort of find common ground between those 2 sides, so not a lot ended up being changed. You know, I will agree with our guest tonight that, and I've said this in council before, that we have seen a decrease in the number of vendors, and it saddens me. And I've said that I enjoy the food from many of our vendors personally, and I like the atmosphere on East Union. And I think our city is a lesser city by not having that kind of atmosphere. So I would like to see it supported. I'm not sure that the proposed changes that are in front of us tonight impact the ability of vendors to do their vending in the city of Athens. So I think it's a different conversation. But I would be happy to work with any members of council to open up a dialogue once again with vendors. With no guarantees. I think the city administration has done what they can to open up additional spots throughout the city, so it's not now just restricted to East Union Street. I'm not sure that any vendors take advantage of those, and maybe we can have a discussion with vendors to find out what the problems are. I've had personal discussions with another vendor about the fees that they pay beyond city fees, but insurance fees and health code, and there's a whole list of things that they are required to do. But we also know that brick and mortar restaurants, also they have high rents, as in most cases are also the same sets of fees. And we don't, we want to keep a balance between our support of both vendors and brick and mortar restaurants. So I do think if a ad hoc committee gets convened again, that brick and mortar restaurant perspective is very important and very helpful. And I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of either vendors or brick and mortar. So I was there really to try to facilitate conversation and to listen. I would be open to participating in that again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so thanks for the comments, and I think what we'll do now, tonight we have before us the change in the or the penalties on this, and so we do need to vote on that, and then this opens up a possibility for other discussions, from what I've heard from council members, so.
I have a.
Yes,
just a
Councilmember
question.
Fall, yes.
We talk about vending, but there is also vending and peddling. I'm not sure if people really understand the difference between those type of different levels that we have in this particular ordinance, So maybe Andy probably could put it in the least amount of words for the biggest amount of impact.
Yeah, peddler's permit is just the opportunity to sell out of a mobile type setup, and from anywhere, any private property in the city. Vending in this particular instance is talking about selling use of public property to sell from. And that's what's regulated more strictly in the city of Athens, is the use of public property. And I think that's what Councilmember Crowell was talking about, having that ad hoc committee that met and worked for a long time to try to come to some sort of consensus on changes to the previous vending laws. And some of the changes that came out of that were a couple other locations other than East Union. Also, I would contend probably the biggest change that came out of that was, rather than having an annual permit fee for that, it switched to a monthly permit fee for renting of public property to sell from.
And I'd also like to point out, it's a right-of-way issue that we are actually talking about. Other people who have gone and do sort of things in those right-of-ways do go through a licensing, like the right-of-way permits that we do. So we do other regulation of it. It's not unusual.
Councilmember Crowell?
Yeah, if I can just follow up on Director Stone's comment. That specific recommendation came from the vendors, that they thought that was in their best interest to have a monthly rather than annual fee, because there are certain months of the year where they are not able to vend, or they can't vend for one reason or another. So being able to pay it monthly obviously helped them. So that was something we could implement, that we talked to the city administration and council approved, and the vendors. So there was a little bit of compromise there. I shouldn't say there was no compromise, but that was something that we did do. Now, I also want to say, and I didn't make clear in my other comments, I feel like we're still in a very strange world coming out of COVID, and I don't know how much that's impacted the vendors. So even a conversation would help me learn more. I feel like that we might get back to something like a normal Athens with regular vendors in the future. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right, thanks, everyone. All those in favor of approving ordinance 11421 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, we have one. Thank you. The motion carries. The ordinance is approved. Ordinance 11521 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title V, Public Utilities, Chapter 5.02, Garbage and Rubbish, Section 5.02.03, Preparation and Storage. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 115. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. This and the few other ordinances that will follow up is our continuation of putting general fees and penalties sort of things into our Chapter 1, our Title I, which is where we want it. So,
Okay.
thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of 11521. Any other questions or comments from council members, elected officials, administration, or our audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 11621 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 13, General Offenses, Chapter 13.07, Miscellaneous Offenses, Section 13.07.07, Citation, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 116.
Second.
Thank you. Same thing, we're moving our citation fees, those sort of monetary things into Title I. Thank you.
Motion and second for approval. We have any comments or questions? from council members, elected officials, administration, or our audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 11721 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.12, Premises, Conditions, Section 29.12.02, Citation, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 11721.
Second?
Thank you. Same thing, this time with Section 29, that's going now into Title I. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 11721. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, administration, or our audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 11821 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, Section 5.06.03 and 29.03.07, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 11821.
Second?
Thank you. This is the Title I that everything has been now moved into and updated. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 11821. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, elected officials, audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 11921 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, Section 5.04.08, Sewer Rates, and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by all members of council and is described, well, I'll let for a motion and second, first of all. Do we have a motion to approve?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion to approve 011921.
Second.
Okay. And this is, as described earlier, a slight increase in residential, commercial, and industrial rates. For residential, the base monthly fee would increase from $5.55 to $5.72 per month. Commercial would be from $6.28 per month to $6.47, and industrial would be from $6.92 to $7.13. And then the rate for the 0 to 15,000 gallons for most of our residential customers, that's the area that they're in, that rate charge per month would increase from $28.40 to $29.25. Do we have any questions, comments from council members, administration, elected officials, or the audience? If not, all those in, oh, yes, Councilmember Fall.
This is something that we have done better lately about following up on and making sure that we don't spend years between having fees increase. We've done that before, but I think that now, and we also put something into most of the ordinances for a review time for these sort of things too, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 12121 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, known as AFSCME, Local 24031, concerning wages and working conditions, and introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 012121.
Second?
Thank you, Member Grace. After, collective bargaining with the union, the city administration agreed on the new contract, as did the union, and this is simply authorizing the mayor to officially approve this agreement with this union. We'll be doing this with two different unions. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, administration, or our audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have Ordinance 12221. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 24032, concerning wages and working conditions. And this is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, President Nyes. I'd like to make a motion to approve 012221.
Second?
Thank you, Member Fall. As stated, this is another union contract with AFSCME Local 24032, which has been negotiated in collective bargaining, and we are ready to authorize the mayor to execute. Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Yes, Councilmember Fall.
I want to say thank you to all the people who worked so hard on this, these bargaining extravaganza of time and energy on everybody's part, and so thank you.
Thanks. All right, we have a motion and second for the approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12321 is an ordinance providing compensation of greater than 25% through the assigned pay grade pursuant to Ordinance 3521 for the Assistant Director of EPW and authorizing the hourly rate to be paid retroactively to the employee's subsequent rehire date. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nyes. I'd like to make a motion to approve 012321.
Second?
Thank you, Member Fall. As discussed at committee and at readings, this was a hire situation with our Assistant Director of EPW. I had a small issue recently and was delivering a item to the EPW garage and got to meet our Assistant Director, and it's quite a pleasant gentleman, and this is a situation that he was hired under, and I feel that we definitely need to meet the original hiring agreement. So, did I say I'd like to make a motion to approve this?
You did, and we've got a second.
That's it, President.
Now I'll ask if there are any questions or comments. Council members, administration, elected officials, anybody from our audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12421 is an ordinance amending the 2021 staffing levels authorized by Ordinance 14120 and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nyes. I'd like to make a motion to approve 012421.
Second.
Thank you, Member Reisner. This is discussed at committee and at readings, the issue of during our difficult 2020 year, moving around the percentages within Arts, Parks, and Recreation for the program specialist in arts, and we are simply moving this back into the original distribution, the FTE, for this full position to come out of 270.940. Thank you, President Nyes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of 12421. Any comments or questions? Council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We will move on now to ordinances for second reading, and we usually read the titles, see if there's any comments or questions. On this first one, however, on 10921, I do believe we're going to suspend tonight. 10921 is an ordinance affirming the Service Safety Director's authorization to enter into a master equity lease agreement amendment to said agreement, separate lease agreements, a maintenance agreement, and a government credit application with Enterprise Fleet Management and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nyes. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 010921.
Second?
Thank you. The reason being is that this actually would be the fourth reading of this ordinance, but because we amended at the third reading to add some simple legal language and an emergency clause in order to pass this more quickly, this is now It was returned, obviously, to first reading, and now this is a second reading, but I'd like to suspend the rules and pass this tonight. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. We have a motion and second to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve 012921.
Second.
Okay. And any further discussion or questions or comments? This is for our master lease agreement for the lease of automobiles for the city. Okay. All right, if no questions from council, elected officials, administration, or audience, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. And there will be a series of ordinances now where I will read the titles. 11321 is an ordinance amending certain sections of Athens City Code, Title 7, Traffic Code, Chapter 7.04, Chapter 7.05, Parking Regulations, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Councilmember Reisner, yes.
I just want to make a statement that we've had some discussion concerning the fee increase for motorcycles. And I heard some, what I thought was interesting suggestions at the council meeting last week, and I would hope the administration and other interested parties would revisit the issue and perhaps find some alternative solutions to just simply raising the fees, though I understand at this point that's really what we need to do. But I hope something more creative can be figured out with this, because I'd like to see personally more motorcycles and scooters in the city and fewer cars.
Right.
So-
And we did have a history that the clerk of council provided for us where at first the fees had not been increased for, I think, about 10 years, but then last were increased in 2018. So it's just been
Correct. Yes.
about 3 years. Okay. All right. Well, we'll be moving towards third reading, but we can always amend.
That's
So-
right.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Council members, administration, elected officials? Yes, Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, President Isley. I just wanted to, thank our amazing clerk of council for getting us the history on the pricing for motorcycle parking permits. And then just because I know people were raising concerns about the price and the cost of it, but just using a fairly simple inflation calculator that you can use on the old internet out there, it's essentially almost the same price that it was based on inflation when it was first created. So it is technically more, but it's equivalent to almost the same amount. So, I don't know. Food for thought.
Thanks for making the calculation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I didn't do it. The internet did it.
Yeah, okay.
I just typed in the numbers.
Thank you for pursuing it. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
It's the interweb.
All right, we'll move on to 12021. This is an ordinance amending the 2021 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
President Isley,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 12021.
Okay. Are we needing to move that one forward tonight?
That was the request that I received.
Okay. I see the auditor nodding yes. Thank you.
Second.
I'm not meaning to doubt you. I'm just checking. Okay. And we
I'd
have a
like to see
motion.
this email.
Motion and second for suspending the rules. The reason being that we are needing to,
The reason being that this was recommended from the treasurer's office. This is again, sorry, do you want more
oh, well,
specifics?
it's the
Or the
auditor's
auditor, that would be
motioning that
great.
she would be ready to
Auditor.
speak. Explain to us.
It's
further.
her idea.
We actually had another reading on this and amended it to add additional money for the rec department.
Okay,
We had money in there for payroll, which we do need
okay,
now, and then we added some more money for the 200 and 300s for supplies and services.
great.
And so when we amended it, that it's been out there for 3 readings.
Got it. Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Good job.
All right, motion and second for suspending the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Crowe.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve 01/2021.
Second.
Thank you, Member Smedley. As noted, this is actually the third reading, but amended at second, so, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. And we have an explanation, a fairly succinct one from the auditor. So any other questions or comments? If none, from council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience, we'll take the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 12521 is an ordinance amending the 2021 appropriation ordinance and introduced by Councilmember Crowe. And are we okay with leaving this at the second reading tonight? Okay, thank you. I'm just the pregnant pause. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, elected officials, or audience? Okay. 12621 is an ordinance approving an education incentive program for non-union city employees, introduced by Councilmember Crowe. And if no comments or questions, we will move on to Ordinance 12821. This is an ordinance authorizing the auditor to reduce 2021 year-end appropriations, introduced by Councilmember Crowe. If no questions or comments from anyone, we'll move on to 12921. This is an ordinance amending Ordinance 6621, authorizing a contract for right-of-way acquisition services for the West Union Street Improvements Project number 322, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And if no comments or questions from council members, elected officials, administration, or audience, we'll move on. 13021 is an ordinance authorizing design engineering services for the Armitage Road Bikeway Spur Slip Repair, project number 348, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Okay. If no questions or comments, we'll now move on to 13121. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA state project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for new pavement and guardrail replacement on Stimson Avenue and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. If no comments or questions from our council members or elected officials or administration or audience, we'll move on to 13221. This is an ordinance granting a special right-of-way use permit to Michelle Jennings, the owner of 28 South May Avenue, to construct a privacy fence, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, elected officials, audience? Okay. 13421 is an ordinance amending certain sections of the Athens City Code, Title VII, Traffic, and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith. And this is introduced by Councilmember Grace. And if no comments or questions from anyone, we will move on to 13521. This is an ordinance amending certain sections of Athens City Code, Title 13, General Offenses, and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith, introduced by Councilmember Grace. No comments from anyone. We will now move on to 13621, and this is an ordinance amending Ordinance 4117 to include a biodiversity conservation plan as part of the Athens Sustainability Action Plan, and introduced by all members of council. And are there any questions for this particular one from council members, administration, elected officials, or audience? If not, what we will do is now take a motion to move into executive session. And that's the portion at which, once we've made that, taken that motion and the roll call vote for that, we'll ask everyone to accept those listed, to excuse themselves from council chambers. You're welcome to wait in the hallway. We will try and be very quick, and then, but deliberate, and then come back, and we will come back in as soon as we finish that executive session, and we'll call you all back into the meeting room. So if I could have a motion for moving into executive session.
So moved to move into an executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining with the mayor, the service safety director, the law director, all members of council, the president, the auditor, and our personnel director.
Okay.
Is that everybody?
Yes, that
All
is.
right.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And the roll call vote, Councilmember Smedley?
Aye.
Reisner?
Aye.
Crowell?
Aye.
Fall?
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Ziff?
Aye.
McCary?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all, we hope, very briefly, very soon. Motion and seconded and voted to come out of executive session. And now we're going to have one other motion where we are adjourning from our special session. So could I have a motion for adjourning from the special
moved.
session? And a second from Smedley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. We've adjourned from that special session. Now, we're going to enter into committee meetings. And our first item on the Planning and Development Committee is, this is chaired by Councilmember Fall and joined by Councilmembers Reisner, Grace, and Smedley. So we'll take just a moment, and this might be new to some of you, but what we have remaining on the dais are the members who are on the Planning Committee. They stay up there, the other council members go down here. It's the council members up here on the dais who will discuss things first, then open it up to other questions from all the other council members, and then open it up to the public to make comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have just one item tonight for the Planning and Development Committee, and that is our annual Economic Development Council presentation by Molly Fitzgerald. What the Economic Development Council is one of our ways that we help the city and the county to do economic development. We fund the Development Council along with the county and the university, so it's a all-hands-on-deck process, and they do a multitude of different types of planning and development planning. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Councilmember Fall, for inviting me to speak tonight. I give this presentation every year ahead of the annual membership renewal for the county, or excuse me, the city to the Economic Development Council. So, like Councilmember Fall said, the city, the county, and the university all pay into the EDC in addition to the Port Authority and Ohio Health. And I'm going to try and go quickly. I know you guys have a really packed agenda today. So the point of this every year is just to give you all an overview of the activities the Economic Development Council has been engaged in throughout the year. So this year we've continued to do, grow and help our existing businesses grow and expand. We've supported entrepreneurship, site development efforts, industry diversification efforts, so we don't remain so reliant on government jobs. We've taken up the remote work strategy this year, examining what works for Athens County and the city of Athens, in addition to continuing to advocate for infrastructure improvements. And I'll get into all of these in more detail throughout the presentation, but this slide just provides you an overview. This is the funding and investment that Economic Development Council has played a role in helping secure. This is countywide. I won't run through all of it for time's sake, but this funding goes directly to companies for expansion projects. This year we actually got some money for communities for technical assistance and planning, site development, and then of course COVID-19 related losses. We've tried to connect our businesses with as much state and federal funding, stimulus money as possible. And so in total it's just under $3 million that the ED helped secure in investments this year. I do one of these each year that I give this presentation, a business retention expansion spotlight. This year it's Rocky Brands. They were awarded a $125,000 Jobs Ohio Revitalization Grant for their expanded warehouse, which is actually in Hocking County, so it was a joint project with Hocking County and Athens County, since Rocky Brands headquarters is in Nelsonville and Athens County. And we'll, of course, feel the indirect and induced economic benefits of that expansion from Hocking County and Athens County. So that was 60 new full-time jobs, 280 retained full-time jobs. They made a minimum investment of $1 million and project an annual payroll of just under $2 million. So we expect the direct sales, this is an estimate using our Jobs EQ economic and workforce data software, direct sales output of $7 million and a compensation impact of just over $3 million. This doesn't necessarily pertain to the city, but I like to include it so that folks know, the Economic Development Council serves the county, and there are a lot of areas of opportunity throughout the county, not just the city, that have a lot of economic development potential. Chansey, Gloucester, and Albany are three that we've spent a lot of time working with leadership in those communities this year. The Bailey's Trail, development around the Bailey's Trail in Chansey, Gloucester, there are really great efforts to revitalize the downtown area in Gloucester, some of those historic buildings. And then Albany, of course, that's the last of our flatland, and we have leadership out at the Village of Albany that's very motivated to get some development out there. Opportunity zones, this does pertain to the city because we have an opportunity zone that runs along Stimson Avenue. Just a reminder, this is a tax credit. It's either a deferral or complete expulsion of, or complete forgiveness on capital gains tax if invested into a qualified opportunity zone. Opportunity zones are a federal program. It's based on census tracts, and we have 3 throughout the county. The issue with opportunity zones to date, they were, the purpose of them is to incentivize private investment in low-income rural and urban communities. We haven't really seen them take off in rural communities, I think, as the program was intended to, as much as the program was intended to, and that, in my opinion, is due to a lack of technical assistance, aka hand-holding, to get them propped up in Southeast Ohio and in our region. So luckily, Buckeye Hills, our local development, local development district, has hired a consultant to help with technical assistance for their 8 counties. Athens is one of those. So moving into 2022, I have a slide on this, kind of looking ahead, but we're going to get that Opportunity Zone Fund propped up for Stimson Avenue. It'll happen. So I'll leave that there. Oh, and also, we also had a line item in Orca's Power Grant, $50,000 for Opportunity Zone assistance. I can't leave here without giving an update on the Port Authority building project, which has been happening forever. So we had to really revisit this project this year. As a reminder to council, the Port Authority owns some land out at the industrial park, had been designing a building with the intent to house global cooling, an expanded facility for global cooling. That business was acquired by a business out of Washington State earlier this year, so their plans have shifted. They're keeping their existing workforce and operations at their current location, but will not be expanding into the new building. So the port has scaled down that project. It will now be a 60,000 square foot building. It's truly speculative, no end user secured yet. And we continue to build out our funding sources for that. Kate and I just applied for an EDA grant last week for the construction of the building. Wetlands mitigation's done. We'll get final designs by the end of the year. We're going to get that building built. We expect to break ground in spring of 2022. So that's an update there. We're going to focus on that 60,000 square foot building, get someone in there, which we know there's demand from our existing businesses, some that are growing or matriculating through the Innovation Center, and others that we've had conversations with that want that space. I know I'm trying to go quickly, so I'm not going to harp on this because I know Brent and Jason from the Voinovich School presented at great length the remote work white paper that they conducted, or that they did for the city, and the Economic Development Council. HAPCAP was involved in that. I just wanted to I bolded one of these, but I really want to bold 2. I want to bold the first one too. So a key finding obviously was that a lot of the programs that started driving the whole remote work strategy phenomenon that came of COVID-19 focus on attraction efforts from high profile, or for coastal cities, high wage earners from coastal cities. That's not going to be the best strategy for us, as Jason and Brent explained to you all. We need to focus on a strategy that yields returns on investment that address our priority areas as a city and as a county. So I bolded the enhancing upward socioeconomic mobility opportunities for existing residents. Rather than attracting some high-age earners to come live and work in Athens, we know we have a lot of folks here who might be underemployed who would really benefit from some remote work opportunities here in Athens County. So how can we lift them up? The other one I wish I would have bolded is the top one, increasing Athens incomes and local spending to be recirculated locally. That's local economic development 101. And then I just pulled this chart because I have to reiterate it. I love this chart. It's showing that really for a remote work strategy, the earners that are making between 50 and 100,000 generate 50% of the estimated impact. So they're the ones that are creating induced jobs, employment, induced labor income and outputs. So, and that I have to note is still well above our household median income, right? So we still have some work to do, but that's where our energy should be focused, not necessarily on people making 150,000 more that they don't need assistance to help relocate themselves to Athens. Okay, infrastructure projects. A lot of the state and federal money, stimulus money that came out, focus on infrastructure projects. So the EDC is doing all it can to advocate for some of these, specifically sewer and broadband expansion projects. Albany and Chansey were working on that. And then, of course, I think this council is very privy to all of the work going around broadband expansion. So we continue to work closely with Paul Isherwood and the HABCAP team on broadband expansion. And we serve on the advisory committee because we of course know that accessible and affordable internet now is a basic utility. It not only contributes to the economic health of our community, but the physical health of our community, our education systems, everything. You all know that. And then I want to spotlight this Business View magazine feature. So Kate Perini is our project specialist. This would not have happened without her. I think we found out that we were selected for the feature story like a week before I went on maternity leave. So Kate did a great job of coordinating interviews and whatnot. So we were featured, Athens County. We pitched this to Business View magazine for their Build Back Stronger edition. They were really curious. I wanted to spotlight the approach that the city and county had taken to COVID-19 recovery. So if anyone hasn't, council members haven't seen this article, we're more than happy to share the link with you. I want everyone to read it, but a big thanks to Kate for all of her efforts on that while I was out. She made this happen. I include this in this slide every year. It's just the programs, the economic development tools and programs that our city helps manage and administer. So the Tax Incentive Review Council, the TIF along East State Street, we do that reporting each year with the help from the auditor and the mayor. We manage our enterprise zone agreements, downtown redevelopment districts, which this will be the first year we have to actually report on the DRDs, revolving loan funds. And then something new that we did through the Port Authority this year was issue revenue bonds for the Woda Cooper housing project, which, as you all know, will create affordable, I think 107, is that what I have up there? Yeah, affordable housing units. So given the high cost of materials throughout COVID-19, that was a way for them to get a sales tax exemption to drive down those costs so we can support affordable housing. These are our partnerships, whether administrative, operational, or just general partnerships. We can't work in a silo, so we rely on a lot of strong partnerships and continue to foster those to get our work done and to leverage opportunity for the city and the county. And then looking forward, I'm going to get that building built. We're going to get that speculative building built. And then I've been working very closely with City Planner Paul Logue on a Vibrant Communities grant. So that's a Jobs Ohio program that is actually for communities, not businesses. And so the focus of that grant request will be for the Armory, rehabbing the Armory and creating a co-working space. Industry diversification efforts are always ongoing. We're working with Buckeye Hills on a study now, actually, to help identify where best to diversify. We'll continue to build out that remote work policy. And then opportunity zones, of course. And then the second to last bullet, workforce challenges. It's not an Athens problem. It's not a Ohio problem. It's a national problem. But the EDC is committed to continuing to work with our workforce partners to see how we can bridge gaps between the skills that our businesses so badly need and some of our training facilities, our educational institutions to bridge those gaps. And I think that's it. I tried to go quick. I hope that was fast enough. This is my contact information. Kate and our wonderful administrative assistant, Ricky, her contact information is up here as well.
Thank you.
Right.
Questions from the committee?
I have a quick question. Thank you, Member Ball. Thank you for being here tonight. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
What collaboration, if any, are you doing with the Sunday Creek Horizons folks?
Yeah, I actually just had a call with Paul Logue today about that. I think they're going to assist with this grant that we're putting together for Vibrant Communities. Given some of the work that they're doing, I think with cost estimates, they should be able to contribute to this, a portion of the grant narrative in terms of what the cost is going to be to rehab the Armory. We want to make sure those numbers are accurate before we submit that grant. So I guess that's one way in which we're working with Sunday Creek Horizons. But again, the city has to be the lead applicant on that. It can't be Sunday Creek Horizons. It can't be the EDC. But the EDC, given that it's a Jobs Ohio program, we're the kind of the middlewoman between the city and the state the money, so.
Great. Yeah, I only asked because it was great to see your involvement with remote work efforts and understanding that and opportunities that we have going forward. And we had previously entered into a contract with Sunday Creek Horizons to analyze that even further, so I wondered if there was any partnerships happening around that area.
I guess my understanding of the proposal that council agreed to with Sunday Creek was kind of for management of the nonprofit to manage the co-working space once it's all up and running, and so.
And incentives, looking at incentives or something like
Yep,
that.
and you know that's part of my job too. So we're happy to
Okay.
work with them to get that done.
Okay, good. All right, good deal. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Other questions from other council members?
Can you clarify what the enterprise zone agreement was?
Yeah. So enterprise zone agreements it's an incentive program that encourages businesses to make capital investments, create more jobs, increase payroll. So the way it works is if a business makes an investment in real property value and the real property value of a property increases, they get a 60%. You can technically go above 60%. We don't ever go above 60% because that requires school board approval. We don't want to take from the school boards or from our schools. But it's a 60% tax abatement on any improved property. So, it can be significant if you're putting a couple $1 million into a building. 60% of the improved property of that building can be a good incentive for a business. So that's how that works.
Thank you.
Other questions? Administration? Okay, audience? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Can I just leave this as is, I guess?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you.
That's the end of planning and development.
Thank you very much. Okay. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Crowell and joined by Councilmembers Reisner and Smedley. And we have one item on that. And I know that we also have our HR director and our auditor and our service safety director here to help with some of that information tonight too.
Thank you, President Isley. I think we can go right to Director Lucas if we want. We have on our drive an outline of the changes to the fringe benefits package. Do you want to address those, Director Lucas?
Let me pull it up here.
Sure. If you'd like, I can read them and then you can speak to them or whatever works for you.
I have it here. So there are a few items that we're proposing to change for the non-union's benefit package. The first one, Section 4, vacation. It's a cleanup of language for fire personnel, and it's they'll receive their 48 hours due under the contract. So essentially, what this will do is eliminate the potential for doubling their vacation when that's not the intent. You know, so there's a certain amount of time you get your bonus, you get your lump sum of vacation when you meet certain parts of your career, 5 years, 15, so on. And what was happening was there was a doubling that was happening on occasion, and we had to fix it. So this will this would just clarify that, clean that language up. Section 16 of the non-union benefit ordinance add wording that unused military hours will be removed September 30th, and the new hours will be added October 1st. So this is just putting it on a different schedule. Not taking anything, it's just changing the schedule. Section 21, paid holidays. We would like to add Juneteenth as one of the federal holidays that our employees would recognize. Section 22, promotions, lateral transfer, demotion, new hires, and current employees. This is just an addition in Section B. Employees would receive their birthday holiday upon the completion of their probationary period. So you need to complete your probation and you're entitled to your birthday holiday. Those were the only ones. There was one for section 23. What this is intended to address is there's sometimes in our non-union employees' career they may top out. They'll reach their highest range of their pay, and then they're stuck. So when you pass a cost of living allowance, they receive something of an allowance, but it's not counting towards their benefits, their retirement, things of that nature. It's just a stipend at that point. With the pay proposal that was provided at last committee, we're hoping to remedy that so that we won't have that problem. But I'm not so sure if we're there yet, so I'd like to look at that language a little bit more to see where we're at. And that was that's all that I have. Oh, and there was one more, the education incentive that is going through readings now. Adding that as an additional part of the education incentive that is in the non-union benefits ordinance, not completely removing that section, just adding the education incentive in.
Okay, thank you, Director Lucas, and don't go anywhere. Any comments from the committee on this fringe benefits changes? Other members of council?
Not really.
Well, I guess.
Oh, yes, please, Member
Quick
Smith.
question, thank you, Member Crowell. So section 23, you're still working out, is that what I'm understanding?
Well, there's some language in there, and I'm not so sure how it if we remove it, how that would have a long-term impact. I'd like to look at that a little bit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It was added when Ray Hazlett was the service safety director, and I'm not sure what was going on with that. And
I'll just repeat my comments from last time we talked about this. The justification to increase someone's pay in order to benefit their retirement just feels a little off. I don't know that.
we're not increasing pay.
Well, it sounded like you were talking about caps to.
So yeah, when someone caps out, they have they can no longer, they can't grow anymore.
Right.
So essentially they're capped. So they're still going to get that pay.
Right.
But that pay is not going to count. It's a lump sum payment that doesn't count towards their hourly wage.
Right.
It just here's your stipend.
It sounds like there might be a structural issue there, not necessarily specific.
Well, and that's the intent of the pay study, is to grow that cap so that that doesn't happen.
I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other council members, questions? So we'll just move right into the pay study, the document we have on our drive, the pay study 2021 costs. And I'll just say that Director Lucas has been working very hard on the pay bands issue, which is connected here. Do you want to address that document we have on our drive?
So I provided you with a clean copy, an updated version. I'm just going to, can I just grab one?
Sure, please.
Thank you. So what this document does is it pulls from the document that I submitted to you last committee that had all the different point totals and things like that. And what this does is it just puts it in one place, the proposed pay band for each position. And then I also took and put every position that is in the non-union, and if there were more than one, put that in there so that we could see more comprehensively that there are more than one fire captain. So instead of just fire captain pay grade 9, we have all 3 captains and what their various rates are. So this is a little bit more comprehensive in terms of our staff and how it affects our staff. And I also included not only information about their proposed rate if they are going to raise to a minimum of pay band if they move bands, but also a cost of living percentage for employees based on 2%. And those would be identified by the COL reference in proposed rate, and also a cost for based on 2.5%. And those numbers came from last Finance and Personnel Committee, So I wanted to just show that and what that would look like. Through the period of time between last council committee and this one, I've had opportunities to talk to department heads and individual employees and work out some things that were identified as problems. So this is a little bit more expansive. If you see on the right with justification, most of them are raised to minimum of pay band. Some of those, again, this goes back to why I separated out with positions, like multiple positions, multiple people in the same title. Some movement through the pay band based on what would happen if a person was raised to the minimum of a pay band and there's a person that's been in that position for a long time, and all they would do would benefit from a cost of living. There's some problems there. So what I did was I used a consistent multiplier of 4 years experience to move people at 2% per year. So when you see raise to minimum of pay band and add 4-year experience modifier at 2% per year, that's what the number proposed rate means for that person. And then they would not get a cost of living allowance or at either 2% or 2.5% unless the cost of living is more than their raise to minimum, which happened once, I believe, in this document. So a little more comprehensive. This kind of includes everything that we did in the pay study. It also includes all the folks that would be impacted by a cost of living allowance if approved by council, and what that number, it would be either 2% or 2.5%.
I appreciate the work that you've done on this, Director Lucas. Are there questions from the committee? I know it's a lot of information to take in at once.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Other members of council? Okay, I feel like this is still sort of an organic process. Or is this it?
I've talked to the people that I believe are going to have conversations with me.
Okay.
So I think that I think it's pretty close.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from city administration? Okay, thank you, President Isley. That ends finance and personnel.
Okay.
Unless,
And
I'm
did
sorry.
do we have Auditor Heck?
Oh,
Did you
I'm
want to
sorry,
make a
Auditor Heck?
comment? Yeah, thank you.
It's really not a big deal, but I was just going to comment on the fact regarding the merit bonus ordinance that was tabled. Council had asked for more information, and we just really don't have it yet. One thing I really wanted to do, and this was a discussion at council, was to talk to our HR consultants, Clemens Nelson. And so Ron reached out to them because he had questions for them also. And Drew Esposito has been our representative for all these years. And anyway, he was busy all last week and got back to Ron this morning. And so we have a meeting with him tomorrow. So I don't have anything to add to that until we do that. I think he will be a more neutral person and who has likely dealt with different entities who have employed this process. We got not as many responses to our "how is it working" email as we did to people who have policies through our previous email. And, you know, basically they're happy with it, but I feel like that's only one side of it. You know, we can go through and pick out all the real good ones. We can pick out really good articles online. But I think an actual HR consulting firm would be the ones to get some additional valuable information from. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Sorry. Just one-
Please, Member Smedley.
Thank you, Member Crowell. I appreciate that update. I was curious when I didn't see it on the agenda.
Yeah.
I appreciate that update. Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
tried. He's just been really busy and we've been
That's the way it
anxious,
goes
but,
sometimes.
you know, Ron followed up with them last week and
Yeah.
so.
Understood, yep, it
So we'll be
happens.
tomorrow, so, you know, once we get something, you know, we'll let you know. Okay?
And my
Thank you.
apologies, Auditor, I knew you had information to share and I forgot to call on you.
Thank you.
Any
You
other?
ready?
Okay, thank you. That ends finance and personnel.
Okay, so we'll now welcome everybody back up to the dais because we're going to have the committee of the whole. And our agenda item on Committee of the Whole tonight is short-term rentals. And Councilmember Fall, I will turn to you for some introduction and before we open it up for discussion and comment.
Well, as some of you might remember, council came forward and asked the Planning Commission to look at short-term rentals. Many people in the community asked for it to be investigated, and also in our comprehensive plan, it's been talked about, and those other things. So I put together with other people on council a resolution, just pretty like the parking process. A resolution goes forward, goes planning commission holds meetings, informational meetings, and a public hearing. So the short-term rental is now back to us with the recommendations from the planning commission. So that's what's in front of you right now, is just the changes to residential zones. This isn't dealing with the B zones or anything, because we did that several years ago. So basically what it's doing is for R1 areas, it is establishing a requirement for a short-term rental permit if by the keeping of not more than 2 renters by a resident owner for periods less than 30 days. It does not allow for non-owner people to have a short-term rental like you do for long-term rentals. And then the changes for the long-term rentals is just basic definitional changes and making sure that they are up to date with the provisions of the Chapter 29, which is our housing code. The other change that Planning Commission put forward was in certain areas, so it's a very much kind of zone approach that the Planning Commission took, is that certain areas where it's on busy roadways, East State Street and some of those other streets, that you would be able to have a short-term rental, and some of the buffer areas. So R3 areas have been, the definitions have been changed and updated pretty much. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. The other things that will come through at the same time will be Chapter 29. That will reflect the changes. Chapter 17, which is the short-term rental fee tax, and Title I, which will have the fees. So one thing I would like to say why it's being brought up right now, it's partly because it came forward, it spent the maximum amount of time that it could with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did hold, like the parking one, they did hold a public hearing on it. They got many input from lots and lots of different citizens. They did their magic balancing act that they do, just like the parking, is that they go and they look at all the input, both in person, in emails, talking with people on the street, all of that sort of input for the planning commission, and they put together this recommendation. So it's the balancing. And that's why in these sort of issues, it's good to have that balancing so that they look at it from a different point of view. And now it's going to go through 3 readings here and a planning, public hearing. Questions?
Thank you. You mentioned the Athens 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which I appreciate, and I wasn't able to find anything specifically about short-term or long-term rentals, but I do see in our section on housing and neighborhoods that the significant number of rental housing units skews Athens market heavily towards housing for Ohio University students and puts an immense burden on the limited resources of city's code enforcement and community development office. So I'm just hoping for some comment on the anticipated strains mentioned already in the comprehensive plan and how this might contribute to or otherwise influence what we've got going on.
Right. I think it's important. We've been talking a lot about affordable housing for the last 6-8 months. We always talk about wanting to turn rentals into owner-occupied. How do you do that? We've been working on, like some of the stuff that was presented through the Economic Development Council, some of the parking issues that have been going forward. And this is all to help balance out, which is something that the comprehensive plan does talk about, is making sure that we have a diversity of housing, a diversity of types of income levels across the city. In a lot of cities, they're finding that there are resource-rich areas and resource-poor areas, and you can see that between the west side, which is probably a resource-poor area. They have a much more dense, there's probably not as many services that are there than other areas in the city. What's found is a lot of times that affordable housing or those sort of issues kind of get foisted off onto the resource poor area. They tend to have better outcomes if it's shared throughout the whole city. And that way you're not just putting the affordable housing in one area sort of thing. So does that kind of explain it?
That answers, that adds some knowledge. I am wondering though, are we expecting that since this creates opportunities for property owners to do short-term rentals, for example, in different ways, will we see or expect to see more properties go toward rental purposes and less or fewer be available for permanent residents?
I would expect that in areas where there's loss, right now I think that in some neighborhoods there's a concern by neighbors of the amount of rental housing that's sitting vacant. If those areas are further away from the school, they have probably a much better chance of being changed over. I think that what we saw through COVID is that a lot of people are land rich in Athens. They may be in that house, but they may be struggling to make ends meet. They may not want to go and have people in their house full time all the time. So it may offer some people an opportunity to make some money from their house, but maybe be able to stay in their house, maybe be able to change it over from a rental into maybe they're moving back into town and those sort of things. So it helps expand the diversity of the housing and the types of housing owners. Question?
To your question, Micah, I would say that it's likely to have the opposite effect, because with the rental rates on a monthly basis for properties in this town, it's highly unlikely that someone would, who currently has a rental property or is a rental owner, that they're not going to change that to a short-term rental rather than a long-term rental. But there are people who would be, as Member Fall said, more able to afford living in a house if they could rent out a bedroom or two on busy weekends, and things like that with, so I don't think it's going to have a significant impact on the, I don't see long-term rental properties being converted to short-term rental properties. And because of the restrictions on where you can have a not owner occupied, I don't think that this will increase the number of properties that are turned into rental. Yeah, I don't know if that was clear, but yeah, that's, the market will kind of prevent that from happening, I think.
Thank you, Member Fall. I think this offers some opportunities for folks on limited income, certainly, to make buying and owning a home in the city an option if they're able to bring in some additional revenue in other ways. I think some of the concerns that I've heard on the west side is, to Member McCary's point, the ability to control from the code office perspective how this is all managed and administered, given that they are understaffed, and that we've talked about that many times. So if we could talk to that a little bit more, that would be helpful. So this does offer the opportunity for short-term rentals in R1s, and then also non-resident owner residents are offered this opportunity in R1s if they abut R2, R3, and any B zone. So if we can get a map of that, I think that would be helpful to kind of get a sense of what communities we're talking about. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Do we know when the public forum would be held?
November 22nd.
Thank you.
Here in council. And I want to say something about, people have a concern when we've talked about the meeting back in council and everything. However, if we have a public hearing, that does not mean that you have to be here saying something for it to be put into the record. So if you want to email it in or you want to Facebook it in, that's fine, and that's perfectly acceptable, and that's the same for anything that we've talked about. You don't have to do it face to face, because I think some people are confused about that. Okay.
Just from some of the comments that I've received, I want to clarify that this ordinance creates a permitting process for short-term rentals, which currently does not exist. That doesn't mean that short-term rentals do not exist. It just means they're not currently permitted within the city. And so I think the fact that if you go on VRBO or Airbnb and look for a short-term rental in Athens, there are a few, but very, very few. And they, as long as you are renting a space out for less than 6 months of the year, you could do that right now without any permitting, any regulation. And the fact that there are very, very few, to me, tells us that there's very little, there's not a huge demand for it. So it's not going to be, well, once we put a whole structure of rules in place to make sure that they are being permitted and that the transient guest taxes are being collected appropriately, there's not going to be a massive transition of residential homes into short-term rentals, because if people wanted to operate one now, they could. It's just the city doesn't currently have a permitting process for short-term rentals, and this creates that process.
And one of the things with part of it being in Chapter 29, the housing code, where the permitting process is talked about, this means that can be updated if we find that there's tweaks that we need that they don't need to go through the planning commission, because they're not dealing necessarily with changing zones. So it's a way of updating. Okay, other questions?
Really just a comment. The concerns I've heard from my constituents are that we've all heard, that there will be party houses, that there will be parking issues, that there will be waste issues. And with a blanket, the compromise that was made through the Planning Commission and through your work, Member Fall, not to have a blanket process in R1 zones, but to restrict it to major arteries and then the abutting zones, I think is the right compromise to make this work effectively. And I would agree with Member Grace that the permitting process, because we do know that there are current active short-term rentals in the city, does allow us to have more control over where they are and how they are run and the economics. Thank you.
Any other questions? Administration?
Just a comment that, as you had indicated, Member Fall, is that much like the off-street parking, the Planning Commission put in a lot of time and a lot of effort and took in a lot of information from citizens, and many who were opposed to the initial ordinance and many who were supportive to the initial ordinance. And so therefore, the Planning Commission, I believe, did the best job possible of pulling together something that was truly a compromise to be able to move something forward so that we do have something that is, we have the ability to regulate. But just a comment.
And if I can pile on that, it's happening now. I mean, Member Grace's comment is absolutely right. There is no mechanism at this point. You can rent out your basement for a night, and you can open your oven to heat it, to keep your renter warm for that night, and there's not a mechanism to say that's not okay. This would allow for that to occur. And there's no transient guest tax being, unless someone voluntarily goes and says, you know what, I'm going to rent out my house under VRBO, and I'm going to bring Kathy the money for the transient guest tax. And I don't know that many people are doing that, but this mechanism then creates that list that then allows that transient guest tax to be collected as well. So there's a lot of work that went in from Planning Commission to do this. It's the best I got. I don't know that we could have threaded the needle much more from that. So, obviously there'll be plenty of opportunity for public comment associated with the reading for the ordinance, and if you want to take in more consideration. But, I've exhausted my ability to make it any better, I think.
Thank you. Other questions?
Were there any estimates of how much transient guest tax this might generate?
No, there wasn't.
And, or even, I'm hearing that this might not be expected to happen very often, but is there any basis for that numerically or from research?
No. We know what we get now.
Yeah.
And so that would be basically a baseline of it, so.
Yeah. Well, depending on the number of permits that go out, my experience with Verbo or with Airbnb is that you're staying in a unit that is often significantly less than you're going to see in your higher profile hotels. And so at the end of the day, it'll generate transient guest tax revenue, but it's not going to be great. It'll pale in comparison to what we see from our hotel complexes in that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I would say we could probably get information from the tourism board on how frequently our hotels are full, and or how frequently we have sort of like high capacity and weekends, which as part of the university community you can probably guess what those are. And or of the Athens community, what our high capacity times are, and those, so we're likely to fill up places that have permits during that time.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. So we can open it to the audience. So come up. Do we have to sign up?
I didn't have sign up, but if anybody wants to speak, you could have up to 3 minutes to speak about this tonight, if you're interested. Sure. You just need to come up and give us your name and address at the podium, and
Karen
we'll...
Williams, 59 Charles Street in Athens, and the only document I have read is from the the A News description of what the Planning Commission put forth. So I may be missing some documents, or missing some points, but that was the only thing I could find. And the only question I have is, I don't see anything in what I read that indicates what a non-resident owner in R1 will be allowed to do with short-term rentals. Did I miss something in the Planning Commission documents? I mean, I understand what they can do if it's owner-occupied and they have less than 2 people. I don't think I saw anything that said what an R1 non-resident owner can do.
Okay. The non-resident owner would not be allowed to have a short-term rental except for in certain situations on certain streets.
Well, I understand that. I don't understand why they decided that if you were the house next to a State Street, you could, that you could somehow do that, but that must have been some compromise that someone who owns a house like that and wants to be able to do it got you to, agree to. The other thing is, would it be possible, when you're talking about owner-occupied, to say not only owner-occupied, but owner-present, if you understand my point? I mean, I could go to Florida, and I own the house, and I'm there most of the time, but guess what? So if someone could add the word present to that, I would find that very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I can cross that one off. Alan Swank, 40 Townsend Place. I guess unofficially I am representing some people. And those would be the 6 people who emailed me in the last 24 hours who on January the 1st will be my constituents as 4th Ward Councilman-elect. We often hear we talk with this people and these people. Well, I'm going to name them, not the people, but the number, and there were 6. And there are some real concerns. I'll ask the simple question because it wasn't stated and clarified earlier. Why now? The Planning Commission rendered their decision 22 months ago. And here we are, a mere 3 regular meetings away from the end of 2 council persons' terms. Arian, don't take this personally, but if there ever was a lame duck effort, this is it. Let's back this thing up and let's talk about it. And let's answer some questions. I talked to the folks in Asheville, North Carolina about this at length in their planning department. And here's what they told me. Airbnbs work. That where you have problems or in cities where you have an inordinate number of special weekends. Let's count them. Dad's weekend, Mom's weekend, homecoming, 6 football games, and I could go on and on and on. Who's going to regulate this? We've heard it again and again and again to the point I'm sick of it. That our code office is understaffed. Well, you know what? Let's hire some more code people. And I guarantee you come January 1st, that's one of the first things I'm going to put forward. Because it's just going to be one of these days where there's a fire and the kids don't get out alive. But how is the code office that's currently understaffed going to find out if the person's present or just the owner of the dwelling? Somebody said there's no demand. To me, this appears to be another solution looking for a problem. Much like the infamous pollinator program. You know how many people have signed up for that so far? 0. Do we really need this? I would ask you respectfully, kick this into next year when you'll have 4 council members who are all been elected for the first time. And let's do due diligence on this to see if we really need it. Thank you very much.
No, it didn't.
No, I asked it once. No.
Do we have other people who'd like to make a comment?
I don't know if I can speak to that. I believe
Yeah.
we did get an answer to the question, and I appreciate your coming up. The answer was R1 non-resident is not permitted to run a short-term rental unless they're on certain streets.
Unless what?
They're on certain streets. And that's,
Unless they back up on courts.
they abut certain streets. And I had requested a map of that, and hopefully we'll get that.
Well, it's the ones that are already permitted for hotels.
Okay.
Stimson, State, the ones that are already. I think the whole point, Diane McVeigh, 83 Grosvenor Street, I've operated an Airbnb in my home for about 4 years. There have been no problems that I'm aware of. I think that the whole point for the people who are opposed to this is to realize there are no current regulations. This will give the city the ability to regulate what's going on. My concern I have a question about is the permitting process. That's not going to turn an owner-occupied home into a rental, is it? Because we certainly do not want more rentals. So it will not.
Only if the owner wanted to. I mean, that's their.
Well, no, your
Is that what you mean?
process, though, is your
Yeah.
process going to turn owner-occupied homes into rentals?
Only short-term rentals. I guess I'm not understanding this.
The designation, please tell me again about the permitting process. What is involved in wanting to do a short-term rental?
Okay. You would have to go through the planning, the
Code office.
code office. And it would be, when you look at Chapter 29, Title 29, that's the process, and it is very much like the process of doing a long-term rental. It would be for a short-term rental. Does that make sense? It's not like a radically different process of going and investigating and, looking, checking on the permit and those sort of things, inspection.
And probably the similar things for the safety.
Yes.
Is what you're looking at, the
Yes.
code office.
Yeah.
But my question is whether or not that turns that house into a rental.
I guess if I can ask a follow-up question, are you trying to clarify what prevents that person from extending that rental to beyond 30 days?
No, I'm saying overall, Athens would like to have a lot more owner-occupied homes versus rentals.
Oh, I see.
Are you turning owner-occupied homes into rentals on the books by this process? Instead of it being designated an owner-occupied home?
I think we can check with the law director to clarify that, but the whole process, to me, describes a permitting process for owners.
Okay, okay.
And I don't think it changes the designation from
Okay.
being owner-occupied
So
to being
it's
a
not,
rental.
you're not
Right.
really, it's
No,
not really.
because we're not in any way wanting to increase, I mean, I don't think our intent, it's just as Service Safety Director Stone said, it's to designate a permitting process so that we can control it, so we can gain some transient guest tax. But also, we don't want our rentals going from 75% rentals in the city to 80% because they're more
Exactly.
short-term rentals. And no,
Exactly.
right.
So that's why I wanted to be sure.
But we
that
can
that was clear.
clarify with the law director's office to make sure what we're
So
saying is correct.
you have an Airbnb?
Yes,
Okay. Do you live in the house?
yes.
So what do you consider your home? Are you owner occupied or are you a rental?
I'm an owner occupied. That's it. I don't have a rental permit on that house. It's my
Okay, well,
house.
let's answer the question.
Yeah, I think.
You've answered your own question,
Okay.
okay?
Well, I want to be clear that the fact that I would go to the code office and get a permit to do what I've been doing
Right.
does not turn my house into a rental.
I don't think
No,
so.
it doesn't.
Okay. But I think
But
that
that's a-
is, from how you were describing, I was concerned about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think one thing that I'll do from this evening is put out a frequently asked question. So please email me the questions that would come up tonight that you would like to see, and I'll put them on a document.
Okay. And it looks like we have Mr. Stouffer. Do you want to? Stauffer.
Jack Stoffer, 69 Elmwood. I'll admit I've had my head in the sand during the pandemic. I'm not up to speed, and I'm not sure I've understood everything I've heard here today, so I'm going to propose a couple questions. Am I under the understanding that in regards to the R1 zone, I'm speaking about R1 only, am I under the correct assumption that what's been said, explained, or proposed is that in R1 zones, there will be no short-term rentals on any neighborhood street other than the main thoroughfares of East State Street, Simpson, Richland, and Union?
No.
No.
So in other words, there can be a short-term rental anywhere in any R1 zone.
No, there's
Can
just
somebody explain to me
further
what I'm
restrictions.
not understanding? Here's my concern. I'm not concerned about R2, R3, any B zone. I'm concerned only about R1, and I'm concerned about the near east side neighborhood for two reasons. One, using your common sense, that is going to be the neighborhood that is the most affected by any movement by this government body. And two, that's where I live. Now, I don't want temporary housing. When you have families in an R1 renting, or you have students in an R1 renting, when there's an event or a kerfuffle or whatever, those people are somewhat invested in the neighborhood, and if a situation arises, using mutual respect for each other, they can be worked out. When someone comes into your neighborhood for a night or two, there'll be a certain percentage of them that don't give a damn about the neighborhood. So my concern in the beginning, and my concern tonight is R1 into the neighborhoods. I had brought up years ago that if it has to be an R1, why can't it just be on the main thoroughfares? And I've had my head in the sand, and I didn't know what had been transpiring. So somebody explain to me how this affects me at my house in my neighborhood on the Near East Side.
Okay.
Should we read?
Go ahead.
The language of the ordinance? It says, short-term rentals, non-resident owner short-term rentals, the keeping of not more than 3 adult renters plus related children by a non-resident owner for periods of less than 30 days on R1 lots that abut an R2, R3, or any B zone, or that the principal home fronts on East State Street, Carpenter Street, Lancaster Street, or Columbus Road. So it has to be on one of those streets, or that the property, the lot, abuts an R2 or an R3 zone.
But it's not limited to that.
Okay,
correct?
then I misunderstood. I thought everybody was up there just shaking their head that, so they cannot, nobody can have a rental on any street off of East State Street beyond one house back.
No, what the buffer zones are is to have a short-term rental where the owner is not necessarily there. The major parts of the R1 and all those areas would be owner occupied with 2 or less people, and that would be a permitted house.
Anybody on any street in any R1 zone, including the near east side, can have an Airbnb.
If they own the house.
If they own the house,
and they-
correct.
If they,
If
if
they own
it is
it
their
and they're
primary
an
residence.
owner occupied.
Occupy.
Like anybody who's in an R1 neighborhood can go and rent their house out as a rental.
I just addressed that. We're talking about a transient crowd as opposed to a 1 year or a permanent. Somebody that's living there that rents their house out to a family, I understand. But if they're renting it out temporary, you're going to get a different crowd. That's been my concern from the beginning, and that's my concern here tonight. But apparently you're trying to run this through with total disregard to the general public and the quality of life that's going to be, there's no upside for the living conditions in an R1 zone, and there's a hell of a lot of downside potential. You need to expect the worst case scenario because you're going to get it. It's just a matter of how often you're going to get it. And that's not why I paid a hell of a lot of money for my house and lived there. And I bought property, and with my property came property rights. And I bought in an R1 zone. And I expect to be living in an R1 zone. And now you're telling me I'm going to be living where there can be transient rentals, and it's unfair, and it's a taking of property rights.
You want to take my property rights?
I'm not trying to take anybody's property rights. I'm
There
trying
can
to
already
defend
be
my property
short-term
rights.
rentals right now. There can already be short-term rentals.
There are no regulations now.
They could be there right now. They're not illegal right now.
Trying to pass regulations.
So anyway, thank you for the question, Mr. Stouffer, and we will continue the conversation. Are there any other questions or comments?
I have just one more.
If you want to come on up, yes, go ahead.
Karen Williams, 59 Charles Street. Am I reading it to understand that when you're in an R1 and you have two people and you've got the permits and the licenses and all the rest of it, do the parking regulations for a regular rental obtain for those two people during the time you've got them there in your house?
That is covered under the off-street parking ordinance. So.
Is that incorporated into this?
There it's not necessarily strictly says rental or not rental. It's by the house. So like if you have a single family house, you need to have X amount of parking associated with that.
Correct.
And that's going through right now, so.
Okay, so that would obtain, so if I own the house and my husband and I have cars and we have the adequate parking for our cars, and we have two people come in for the weekend, what's the deal about their cars? Do I have to provide parking for those cars?
According to the housing code, it depends on where you are. Like if it's a B zone or not, that's going to be different.
No, I'm in an R1.
Right.
Okay, I own a house. I've got two cars.
Is your concern that people will be parking on the street?
Yes.
Is that a concern?
Yes, because I have a driveway and I have a garage. If I have two more people in my house, I can no longer fulfill the obligations of a single-family house because I do not have two additional parking. All I'm asking is, do those rules still apply about having adequate parking? As it would if you were renting a house to a family for a year and they had 3 cars, and of course one ends up on the grass because, no one, and I understand why, but no one is around to get the teenager's car off the grass because mom and dad each have a car. But there is an issue there, and I'm sort of curious about how that would work.
Well, what I'd like to do is go and pick out the parts of the parking, off-street parking that says specifically for that. And
Okay,
I will
no,
put it on my
yeah.
frequently
Put
asked
it in the
questions.
whatever that's coming out from you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One real quick question. Alan Swank, 40 Townsend. Let's go back to this occupied versus present. If you've ever tried to rent a hotel room here on graduation weekend, it's a pretty crazy process. There are people that literally line up at the door of the OUN and other hotels exactly 6 months or 9 months out to be the first person in line. In other words, hotels are hard to find during graduation weekend. So let's say that I live in an R1 neighborhood over 40 Townsend, that I want to rent my property out for graduation weekend. And I'm going to go so far as to, you know what, maximize this. I'm going to make it a 3-night minimum. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. And I can, by this ordinance, only rent it to 2 people. And I might be able to get $1,500 for that. In fact, I know I can get $1,500 for that. Do I have to be in that house? Question number 1, do I have to be in that house that weekend?
You're an owner-occupier.
Do I have to be in that house that weekend?
The idea is that you are living in the house.
Do I have to be in that house that weekend?
Does he have to be present?
It says present.
It does say present in there?
Is
It
it?
doesn't say present.
Okay, okay. A person who is
I
rent,
didn't read present in
Okay.
what I read, in the message, in the news.
And this is one of the reasons we're asking you to slow this down, because there are a lot.
Would you really let strangers stay in your house like that, Alan?
What's that?
Would you let strangers, even for $1,500, would you let strangers have your house for the weekend?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, you know why I would do that? Because my daughter lives right across the street,
Okay, there you go.
okay?
Okay.
But you know what? That's easy $1,500.
Good answer.
It's 2 people though. Remember, it's only 2 people. So if something's missing, 1 of the 2 of them took it. But I'm not worried about the 2 people.
Can I just say really quickly, I feel like I'm missing a point here or something. Can't this already happen?
yes.
Like, you
Yes.
could do this today. Like, I could rent it, if I owned a house, I could rent it right now for graduation
But
weekend.
the flip side of that, Ben, is we could also pass legislation that says you can't do that. And that's what nobody's talking about.
But are the people who are doing it creating any problems? That's, so.
We heard today there's no demand. Anyway, let me go back to the question. The question
Wait,
is.
Mr. Swank, you can ask one more question, and then it's a
I'm
very,
asking-
it's a
I'm
very
asking-
long night, and we're gonna have a
Okay,
public
understood. I've
hearing.
asked the same
I'm
question
gonna ask you
5
to
times.
finish the question, and then not berate, let's just have the
Do I need-
discussion and then move on.
Do I need to be present in an R1 zone if I were to rent it under those conditions?
I guess it depends on you. I think one thing that I have some disappointment in is that we trust our neighbors so little. And we're trying, Planning Commission tried very, very hard to thread that needle between trusting your neighbors and trusting what they do, trusting that they want the best for their house because they're the owner and they live there, and going and having the other extreme of what if this or what if that. That's already happening. If we make a law that says you cannot have a short-term rental, it will not stop short-term rentals in this city, because there will be people who will go forward and do it. And presently, we have short-term rentals out there that are not causing any problem. What we're trying to do is make it much more of a regulated market so that you don't have problems and that you don't have impacts or interference with the other uses of those neighborhoods. They're out there, they're working, people like Diane McVeigh have them.
Thank you.
You know?
Okay, thanks. Mr. Stouffer, you can have like 30, but we're going to take Mr. Delac first.
Thank you.
You get up to 3 minutes. Mr. Stouffer, you've already had several minutes over. You can do one more question and then for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go on to our other committee items, because we do have a public hearing and we have an opportunity for people offering feedback. So 3 minutes for Mr. Delac, 2 minutes for Mr. Stouffer. Is there anybody else? The other question is, before Mr. Stouffer speaks again, is there anybody else in the audience who wants to speak who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? And you would like to speak. So 3 minutes for Delac, and I'm sorry, your gentleman's name?
Jones, I only need a minute or two.
Okay, and then Mr. Stouffer last, and then we'll close.
So, I'm Rob Delac. I live on 124 Morris Avenue in the Near East Side neighborhood in the R1 zone. And I think, as it's been stated already by folks in City Council, by the mayor and Service Safety Director Stone, it's the wild, wild west out there right now. If there is demand for this in excess, it would be happening. We have something that I think we're afraid the sky is falling. The sky could fall right now the way it is, and there's nothing to stop it. This is a reasonable proposal that has been well vetted through a long process, and it's finally here. I'm glad to see that. And I would like to see this legislation passed to regulate short-term rentals in my neighborhood. I would like to see that. But I would also like to see my neighbors have the opportunity to have a short-term rental, if that's what they need to do financially, to stay in the house that they're currently owning, or maybe even purchase a house and occupy it and have a short-term rental to be able to afford to live in that house. Those are the kind of things we need to do in this town to make it a better place. Stopping all short-term rentals is not going to make the city a better place. We need those opportunities for people, and I fully support this legislation. I haven't seen all the dots and details exactly here on this. Look forward to reading the details. But from what I've heard tonight, I fully support that and would like to see this go forward. And again, the sky is not falling. This is not going to ruin the city. It is going to make it a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jones.
Chris Jones, 47 Avon Place. I just wanted to state that I'm a first-time homeowner in an R1 residential. I think there's been a lot of talk and fear that this would affect affordable housing. And I just want to say that affordable housing is totally a relative term. And that to live in an R1 residential and to buy your first home now, this, not 20 years ago, not 30 years ago, but now, it's not the market that it used to be. And anything that can help out to help my generation and me personally to be able to make a mortgage and live in a nice neighborhood and respect a nice neighborhood, but be able to afford to live in it, I think is helpful. And I wasn't clear on the rules. I'm not running any short-term rental now, but I would like to do it. I'd like to see it regulated, and I'd like to pay taxes on it because I think that's the right thing to do to help the city out and to help pay for the additional cost of regulating. I think there is potentially some impact, which it sounds like it can happen now, that anybody from out of town could come into Athens and buy a house and use it as an Airbnb or as a short-term rental. And personally, I would like to see something in there like what you currently have in order to ensure that we keep it as owner-occupied or resident of Athens who will respect their community that they live in order to keep the money in Athens and to increase the demand and the value of homes in Athens as well. So I'm in support of this from what I've read so far, and I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stouffer, 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. I ask, beg really, for you not to allow short-term rentals in the R1 zone. You have all your B zones. You have your R3, you have your R2. Those are intended for business. R1 is our most restrictive zone for a reason. It is sacred. If R1 is sacrificed for political favor, this body and administration will do the vast majority of citizens a disservice and a taking of our property rights that we bought and paid for when we purchased our property. You have the power, but you also have options. Leave R1 out of this action completely, which would be the most responsible thing to do for the majority of the citizens. As I previously brought up, if you must include R1, restrict it to the main thoroughfares so it does not encroach on the heart of the R1 neighborhoods. You are elected to represent the regular people and citizens. Do your job. Represent the regular folks. I know you want to be perceived as progressive, but taking one's property rights is not progressive, it's irresponsible, it's regressive, and it's outright wrong. Please don't let politics, as usual, and cave to the pressure from the mayor and Ms. Fall and whoever else is trying to essentially rob the general public of our property rights and our peaceful enjoyment of our home. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. All right, thank you for the discussion. We'll have the public hearing on November 22nd. And as I understand, the follow-up will be a map that will help us, and then also the frequently asked questions. Okay. And we appreciate all the comments tonight. Thank you. We'll now move on to City and Safety Services, and that's chaired by Councilmember Grace with Council Members Fall and McCary.
I kind of feel the need to stand up. It's been a long meeting. Okay, thank you, President Niasley. We have just one item on our agenda this evening, and that is the consideration of a contract, an administrative services contract with between the city and HAPCAP. I think the partnerships that the city forms are one of our strengths. It enables us to really do some things beyond our borders as well as within by partnering with agencies such as HAPCAP. And this is a contract that would grant HAPCAP the administrative services responsibilities for the CDBG allocation funds. The city is eligible for allocation funds every even year, and a portion of those includes Fair Housing Program, which we already have a contract. HAPCAP already administers that for us. And there is a maximum percentage of the grant that HAPCAP can charge for this administrative service, and that maximum percentage is 15%. However, the contract up for our consideration is for 13%, because the city would still be handling some pieces, which notably the City of Athens will cover costs associated with citizen participation and project selection aspects of the CDBG program. So I think this is a win for the city to partner with HAPCAP for administration of our CDBG allocation funds.
Maybe talking about some of the projects that we have done in the past would help people understand some of the...
Yes, I would actually love to get a list of past projects, and also if there's a list of, these are things we would like to put on our list. The total, the grant total is, for this 2-year allocation is $150,000. The Fair Housing Services is a max of 5% of the grant, and that's $7,500. And then $19,500 would be the 13% for general administration, leaving project expense available of $123,000. So I would love to see some of the ideas that the administration has already. I'm certain there's more than $123,000 worth of projects in.
Well, I was going to mention, Member Grace, there's other programs where we have tried to apply for them, and we've been unsuccessful. RPIG is one, which is a terrible name, I know, or an acronym rather. It's, Real Property Investment Grant. But HAPCAP has a strong track record in terms of knowing how to navigate through that state system to write the grant correctly to get that, be able to be eligible and receive grants of that nature. But we can certainly get a list together for you. But again, it'll also include some granting mechanisms where we have not been successful in getting funding.
Those, like the RPIG and critical infrastructure, are separate from and would involve different administration fees if we were to get those grants. But I think HAPCAP knows what they're doing, and they do this well, and so we're fortunate to have the opportunity to partner with them. Are there questions from council? But prior to first read, just a list of some of the projects, past and future, would be fantastic. Other members of council? Our much depleted audience? I'm sure you have some questions.
She wasn't referring to
Just as sexy as short-term rentals.
Yes.
Goodness.
CDBG, it's Community Development Block Grants. Okay, and that concludes this committee meeting.
Thank you. Last but not least, Transportation. Chair Jeff Reisner with Sam Crowell and Ben Ziff, council members Sam Crowell and Ben Ziff. Oh, there's Ben.
Give a little brain dead.
You all settled in? We only have 28 items to go through before we leave here. The first one, Transportation Committee, is 24-hour parking, amend Athens City Code. Let's see, which one is that here? Oh, I suppose it has something to do with an ordinance suspending Athens City Code Section 7.05.03, continuous parking in the same location from Sunday, December 19, 2021 through midnight on Saturday, January 1st, 2022, and declaring an emergency. And we do this every year, as far as I can remember. It's essentially parking for shopping and things. So, anyone have any comments on it? Anyone opposed to it? Member Grace.
Suspending the 24-hour in the residential, correct? Does it also address the parking meter and the parking garage?
The next
one.
one.
That's next, okay.
That's the next one.
Yeah.
Don't get ahead of me.
You're the one that mentioned.
No, I didn't mention fees. Don't put that on me. I got enough people angry at me. Okay, second item, holiday parking, parking garage, and continuous on-street. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and on-street meter parking and declaring an emergency. And it further states that the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to suspend the fees for parking, excluding 2-hour metered spaces on one upper as follows: after 5 p.m. on Thursday, December 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, 2021, and all day Saturday, December 4th, 11th, and 18th, 2021. That's it. Any comments, questions? Mayor?
I have a comment.
Sure.
And maybe this is for 2022's City Council. Consider taking up a change to City Code that reflects this, to where every year we don't have to go through this process when it comes to the holiday parking.
Make too much sense.
It kind of does, but you know, I have faith in council, so.
That'd be something for the
Thank you, sir.
new planning committee. Member McCray.
Thanks. I am just wondering if you can clarify, given that this is an annual process, what the use of the term emergency means in this context.
An emergency, go ahead, Mayor.
Well,
Yeah, you explain.
I can, and I believe the emergency implies the fact that when we put together our slate of street closings and other events that take place uptown, that did not get in there. And knowing that we are bumping right up against when this should be taking place for the betterment of our uptown businesses, when it comes to holiday shoppers, that we need to get this through. So therefore, once council votes and passes this, moves it forward, as soon as president of council and clerk of council and I sign this, then it goes into effect right away.
Normally it's 30 days for non-budgetary things. So that's why you have the emergency.
3 readings and then 30 days before it went into effect is the actual.
Yes, thank you.
Did you have a comment, Auditor?
That was it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that otherwise it doesn't take effect for 30 days until after it's passed.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, there isn't one.
Oh, there is.
Okay.
That concludes transportation.
And we are closed at 9:36 PM. Thank you very much. We'll see you next Monday night.